Welcome back to the all-new and all-new look SportsMax zone. Some teams will have to cope without the services of their English Premier League players as action resumes Thursday in the South American World Cup qualifying. One player coming out to voice his displeasure over the upcoming qualifiers is the Uruguayan veteran defender Diego Godin, who believes the EPL club's decision to refuse releasing players will tarnish the South American World Cup qualifiers. This is what Diego Godin says. All I will say is the truth, that the competition has been tarnished by what happened. It's not normal that national teams cannot count on the players that the coaches want to pick. And in our case, we're without Eddie, that's Edison Cavani. And it's not normal that players are wondering whether or not to come because they're stuck in the middle. Yeah, so for Argentina, well, they have agreed with the clubs in England that players would only be involved in the first two World Cup qualifiers, which will be against Venezuela and Brazil, and then return after that. Now, these are the matches on for Thursday's match day in the South American World Cup qualifiers. Bolivia, they'll be in action. Venezuela, well, we'll get those matches on for you because those are graphics that are not telling the true story. And the matches, though, there will be matches on the Home of Champions on Thursday and Friday. You can look out for the schedule of those matches as well.
Lance, I can probably jump in because Bolivia will be playing Colombia. Ecuador will be up against Peru. Venezuela, they play Argentina. Peru again with Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, and then on Sunday, the one that I'm looking forward to the most, Argentina up against Brazil. So based on what, the narrative coming out, Brazil, a lot of people are saying Brazil has been hard done because 9 of their players will be missing. And of course, many feel as if Argentina is the one who's benefiting because, not so much of their players will be affected. How do you feel?
Well, first of all, as we discussed yesterday on the show when we were talking to Brent, and the fact that, not only the South American qualifiers, but as the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers start tomorrow as well, we'll look more closely at those on Thursday's show. But it is very, very unfortunate that the English Premier League has been allowed to get away with, holding on to their players and not releasing them, because at the heart of it is that FIFA demands that players should be released by their clubs to play international matches. The UK government has red-listed a lot of countries because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and because of quarantine rules, it just means that players who go to red-listed countries, when they come back, they'll be quarantined for 10 days and miss important matches. So we understand the difficulty that the clubs have and the feeling that they don't want to release their players in a situation when they can't have them back in a timely manner. But rules are rules, and FIFA does dictate generally that when international matches are on, clubs are obligated to release the players to international duties. Yeah. And I see where Argentina has been a little bit more successful in, getting the English clubs to waiver their stance. And Brazil, not so much. Juan Arango now joins us, and maybe Juan can tell us a little bit more about that, because Juan, the entire hemisphere, both South American and CONCACAF, facing World Cup qualifiers coming up on Thursday through to the weekend and into next week. And real problems here. Brazil to miss 9 of their players, Argentina not so many. But your thoughts on what has happened with the English Premier League and their resistance, for reasons that they have said, but their resistance to releasing players to World Cup qualifying?
Well, if you look at it from the perspective of the South American teams, and actually a report came out, an article came out today on Global, talking that basically what the Premier League is looking to do is to sabotage South American national teams. Pretty straightforward. And it's not just the Premier League that's doing it. Today, actually, in the past couple of days, Zenit St. Petersburg has been also kind of guilty of doing the same thing. They've been threatening their players via text messages and things of that nature that they have to come back now, like as in today, back to report to national team duty. And pretty much the Brazilian FA has already just come out about an hour or so ago with a statement saying that they're going to go to FIFA and trying to get some type of punishment from that type of behavior, because they are definitely being, they're pretty much being backed by FIFA, as you mentioned before, Lance, about them having to have the freedom of calling up players. Now, I find this all strange because it's these same national teams that kind of put some of these players in the radar of a lot of these Premier League sides, a lot of these Russian sides, a lot of the Serie A, and a lot of the teams that have been very adamant, La Liga too, who also had this issue as well, that pretty much their performances at the national team level are the ones that put them in the Premier League or La Liga or Serie A or even the Russian Premier League as well. You start looking at it from that perspective, and it's kind of, hey, we want rules, but we want rules to benefit us and only us. And that's been the perspective. At some point, you understand the investment that's being put in, but the rules are the rules. And going into this, you know that these types of players want to play for their national team at all costs. So much so that the Argentine national team players said, you know what? You're not going to stop me from going. I'm going. Goodbye. And so much so that when they return to national team or back to the Premier League, they're not going directly to England. They're going to Croatia, which is a loophole that many found, that they can stay there for 10 days, remain training instead of being locked up in a hotel near Heathrow Airport, and maintain their fitness, be able to come back into the country without a problem, and be able to play whatever matches they can before the next qualifying round that starts in October.
Yeah, the difference there with the Argentina and the Brazil situation, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because you have said that the Argentines were insistent, they were unmoved in their position, Brazil not so. Is there something to take from that?
Well, there has been talk about negotiations that were going on between the Argentine FA. They kind of had a jump on everybody else. Nobody at least many in South America didn't expect this. That's why some of the players that were called up ended up being scrapped at the last second. But the Argentine FA were the ones that came out and started negotiating with the Premier League sides, asking them, hey, at least let them go 2 matches. Let them go 3 matches. Keep in mind, it's 3 rounds that they're playing now. There will be about anywhere between, I guess you could say, anywhere between 4,000 and 6,000 kilometers just in World Cup qualifying play miles that are going to be expended by some of these national teams, Argentina being one of them, as they currently find themselves in Venezuela and then have to go home to World Cup qualifying play. Keep that in mind when you start hearing about these negotiations that have been going on. That said, some of the teams weren't moved, and they said no. And that's when the players came and said, no, you're not stopping me. I'm going.
Yeah.
Emiliano Martinez said, no, you're not going to stop me from going. My national team's my national team, and that is my priority. Yeah. Country over club, which is the mentality that many South American players have in that perspective, instead of the opposite when you start looking at more European sides. And that's been the big issue in terms of that. That's been the big grudge right now that's going on between the South American national teams and the European clubs. Yeah,
the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, sent a statement to the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, appealing to him to, allow the waiver the situation to allow players to go play World Cup qualifying football and return. I was very keen to assess the tone of his letter to the British PM, appealing, and he wasn't very insistent. Do you think he could have been stronger?
Of course, it could have been stronger. He could have been much stronger, and that's the issue when you have very weak statements from FIFA saying, well, maybe it'd be great if you let him go. It's not. You have to be very firm in these types of situations, because these are, again, some of these teams are some of the teams that were part of the Super League, and now they want to, like I said before, it's rules that they want for them and only them, and to apply to them and only them, and for them to be accepted for them and only them. And that again ends up being the most irritating part of it for anyone outside of the Premier League circles, or even outside of European football circles. So that again, you and Jamaica are feeling it right now as well, with the Jamaican national team and the limitations they have in terms of which matches they can play. The same thing with the Mexican national team, same thing with the U.S. national team to a certain extent. And there hasn't been that same. Now, I'll give you a prime example. How can they allow U.S. national team players to go play in Austin, Texas, which is one of the states with the highest levels of COVID cases in the United States and in the world, but it's not okay to go play in Jamaica.
Yeah. And Juan, the people at the center of all of this, the players, who are mainly affected by these limitations, how do you feel they are dealing with it? I saw one post from Thiago Silva in a Chelsea jersey, of course, his hands tied behind his back, and his caption was, "Need I say anything more?" And then we had Richarlison, of course, doing it a bit subtle, saying, posting a goal of him scoring for Brazil and just, saying how much he enjoyed it.
But one I think that's the most telling is Tyrone Mings. When he goes and says, hey, I totally understand what my teammates are going through. I understand why they went. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. And I understand why they're going. And I have to back someone that's that committed to a cause. Like I said, he's the one that pretty much makes it that much more important. Same thing with Emiliano Martinez. And I use him constantly because he was the one that encouraged everyone else to go and say, you know what, Premier League? No, I'm not paying attention to you. I'm going and I will take on whatever responsibilities I will accrue. That's been the big issue. And to see his reaction and his captain's reaction, that tells you a great deal of what needs to be done and what players can do in order to say, you know what, no, I'm not paying attention to you because I have FIFA's backing.
All right, Juan, we've got to leave it there. We'll be monitoring the matches closely, of course, but I think the English Premier League has taken a bit of hit over this story because people worldwide love the English Premier League, but this is a stance that they've taken that is not very popular. But we'll talk more on it. Yeah.
All right, we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, okay. Juan Arango there. Now, wrapping up this segment, there was action Wednesday in European World Cup qualifying. Can we check in on some of those results now? Kazakhstan 2-2 with Ukraine. Portugal 2 Ronaldo goals, 2-1 over Ireland. Bosnia-Herzegovina 1-1 with current world champions France. Latvia winning 3-1 over Gibraltar. Norway 1-1 with the Netherlands. The Faroe Islands beaten 4-0 by travelling Israel. Denmark 2-0 over Scotland. Russia 0-0 with Croatia. Luxembourg 2-1 over Azerbaijan. Montenegro 2-2 with Turkey. Slovenia 1-1 with Slovakia. Malta 3-0 winners over Cyprus. Moldova, they were beaten 2-0 by travelling Austria. So that's an update of matches in the European World Cup qualifying today. And the big star player that Manchester City's Maria Ramharak didn't want, Cristiano Ronaldo, hits 2 for Portugal.
Well, I'm happy to see him, finding the back of the net because that's what Manchester United would be depending on him to do, right, Lance? After all, that's what cost you the title last season, so good on him. That's what you want,
yes,
yeah?
Yes, it is. He's showing form. He's showing form ahead of his entry to Old Trafford.
Let's hope he does it.
Yeah. We go to break. A lot more to come on the SportsMax zone.